trying to find deals. We're not trying to overpay for properties. And put yourself in a position to actually collect additional information that can be used throughout the follow-up process. You are not in the game of convincing sellers to sell. You are in the game of maintaining your top of mind nature and building your mind share with sellers over a period of time so that when they do have that triggering event, you are the one they call. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another quick solo episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be chatting about the 3 most common objections that we get from sellers and how we handle them in our business. All right, so before we get to the meat and potatoes of this episode, I want to officially share that we have launched our newest investment offering here at Aligned Real Estate Partners. This is the New Hampshire Multifamily Fund III. It's basically our 3rd iteration on what has been a very successful strategy for us over the last couple of years, and that is raising capital to pursue these smaller multifamily assets that we predominantly find through our direct-to-seller marketing and prospecting. We're really excited to share this with our investors, primarily because this is an investment vehicle that is typically not offered to LPs and passive investors in the sense that it's really hard for LPs to invest in small multifamily properties, which I'll define as, call it 3 to 20 units in size, because it doesn't make sense to raise capital for them on a deal-by-deal basis, as the legal costs significantly drag the deals. So with this vehicle, we are offering investors a chance to partner with us, invest alongside us in the deals that we source at significant discounts to market value via our direct-to-seller marketing prospecting, and then through our extensive local relationships in the New Hampshire market. We're only buying small multifamily deals in New Hampshire. We're managing them in-house with our in-house management company, Blue Door Living. And this is a strategy that we have executed countless times. I've done over 50 of these deals in my career, 475 plus units in total. And myself and my partner in this entity, Burns Capital, run by TJ Burns, Burns Capital Partners, I should say, run by TJ Burns, have partnered numerous times on similar projects. So rinse and repeat business models in a market that we have extensive connections in and a significant focus in terms of where our portfolio currently is, as well as the vertical integration through our management company. So really excited to share this opportunity with our investors. If you'd like more information above and beyond what I've just shared, go into the show notes. I'm going to link to the OM and I'm going to link to the deal room. Download the OM if you'd like to learn more about it. And lastly, for legal purposes, this is a Reg D 506C syndication that is available only to accredited investors. And if you'd like more information on that, legal structure, split, pref, all that stuff, jump into the OM in the show notes. But now that that's out, let's talk about how we deal with seller objections. So what I want to share today are the 3 common ones that we get, or the 3 most common ones, I should say. And this will pass the sniff test, the logic test with everybody listening that does any level of direct-to-seller marketing as the most common ones. And my goal here is that you walk away from this episode with a couple of tips on how you can actually go back to a seller who shares this with you. So first things first, I'm not ready to sell. By far the most common, right? Timing's not right. I hadn't thought about selling. I just bought it a few years ago. I might want to sell in a few years when I retire. Timing's not right. I don't want to sell, right? We'll just lump those objections into one. And this is oftentimes not going to be something that you can overcome in terms of you're not going to necessarily convince someone to sell unless you offer a price that is so compelling that they feel like they need to, right? And that's obviously not why we're marketing directly to sellers. We're trying to find deals. We're not trying to overpay for properties. But what this allows you to do is at least learn more about the seller and put yourself in a position to actually collect additional information that can be used throughout the follow-up process. And for folks who have listened to this podcast for a long time, especially the episodes where I'm talking about marketing and prospecting to sellers, you'll probably hear me come back and use this analogy oftentimes, which is you are not in the game of convincing sellers to sell. You are in the game of maintaining your top of mind nature and building your mind share with sellers over a period of time so that when they do have that triggering event, you are the one they call. So a few questions that you can ask here to round this objection out. And the first one, that's completely understandable. Understand that this timing may not work for you. I understand that we just reached out to you out of nowhere and this is maybe not something that you were thinking about. Why don't we make you an offer at this time so that when the time comes that you're actually more interested in selling, you have something to refer back to, and at least it gives you something to chew on in the interim. We really, really push to make offers, even in situations where the seller is seemingly not motivated or they're just not looking to sell. And the reason is that there are a percentage of sellers who maybe have a skewed perception of their own property's market value and may actually be interested in selling at your price. They just don't know it yet, right? The timing may not be right for them for one reason or another, but in their mind, they still may say, oh, I'd still probably sell if I got like a really good number for the building and, whatever. And you might share a number that actually eclipses that figure. Now, let's say that you don't, right? Let's say that they're truly not looking to sell. This number doesn't motivate them. Sharing an offer at least gives you an opportunity for you to better build that relationship because you've actually seen that process all the way through. A seller, or I should say, a potential buyer becomes much more memorable to a seller who sends them an LOI, who sends them a purchase and sale agreement, who actually gets them an offer. And versus one who goes, oh, okay, timing's not right, let's chat when it is. So you still want to pull that thread as far as you possibly can to build that relationship with the seller. Because the first thing that seller's going to do when they go to sell is, let's go talk to that guy that actually made us an offer, right? They're going to think that before they think of the prospective buyer who didn't actually see that conversation all the way through. Now, the one thing that's important to note here is that you really want to make sure your offer doesn't alienate the seller from a pricing standpoint, right? So you probably want to come in close to the top end of your range or right at the top end of your range with the information that you have. Because if you play this too conservatively and you offer a number that's far too low, you might be benchmarking that seller to a figure that doesn't necessarily give you the opportunity to earn that call back in the future because you've alienated them, right? So you have to use some level of diligence here and make sure that you're not alienating the seller with the number that you share, but you're getting enough information to make that right offer. Other thing you can do is ask a few follow-ups. If you were to sell in 6 to 12 months, what would have to happen first? What would happen? What would need to happen now for you to become a seller, right? Start pulling those threads. Completely understand. Is it okay if we check in a few months? Is it okay if I put you on a follow-up cadence? Anything that I can help you with in the interim? Do you need any connections to industry vendors such as insurance providers, GCs, PMs, attorneys, etc.? Happy to be a resource in the interim if I can be, right? And the goal here is to continue building that relationship. Objection number 2. And this is literally one of the most common objections that we get. And I'm really not kidding, right? Is this more common than number 3 in terms of the percentage of deals that we look at that we get it in? No, but this is another really common one that we get. I don't want to disrupt my tenants, right? And when they say that, what they really mean is my tenants can't know about the sale. And what they really mean is I'm concerned about my tenants finding out about the sale and them getting either angry with me, getting nervous about this process, leaving the property, vacating their units because they're unsure of what the future holds for them, violating some type of personal relationship, which is really common with mom and pop residents who are, or I should say mom and pop owners who are self-managing. They oftentimes develop those relationships with their tenants. So the one thing that you want to say here is you want to be really honest about what your plans are with the property, right? And you want to be really direct. I'm a big fan of being honest here. And I know that there are many unscrupulous investors who might say, no, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to raise the rent. We're not going to do anything with these folks. And I don't really think that that's a great way to conduct business, because I think really when you're going direct to seller, the goal is you need to establish trust and rapport with the seller before you really get anywhere. And I'll be the first to say that when we pursue these deals, we say, if we're going to pay you the price that we're offering, it's assuming that we need to renovate some of these apartments and that we probably need to increase the rents in order to justify this big number that we're paying. If you want to sign all of these tenants up on long-term leases and provide them with the security that comes with, transitioning the management to a new owner, then the price needs to reflect that, right? And most owners understand that, right? Especially the long-term owners who have very little debt. They bought it at some really low price. Now they're selling it for some much higher price. A lot of these owners know their rents are low, right? But they just don't have the active motivation to go and increase them, right? That speaks to specifically the concerns that many owners have around management transition. Now, for the owners who are just petrified that their tenants are going to find out, a lot of things you can do here. Write into your offers that we're only going to access X amount of units, right? And we can access the units that are occupied by the residents that won't be home, right? We're only going to need to walk through the building one or two times during the sales process. Maybe it's once for your inspections, another time with an appraiser, right, to work through the lending process. Number three, we'll role play whoever you want us to be. We can be the bank, we can be the insurance company, we can be whoever, right? And then you want to make sure that you fulfill that and honor that throughout the transaction process. But really, what these owners are saying is that they're just afraid of tenants leaving, right? They find out that the property is being sold and then they leave. So, really, what you need to do is assuage their concerns by communicating that you're going to get close to the end of the transaction where your earnest money might become non-refundable, where you're tied to the deal before their residents end up finding out. Objection number three. I'd only accept an offer over market value. I'd only accept a price that was really compelling. I'd only accept a number that's crazy, right? And I'm using language here that isn't a specific number, right? If a seller's like, I'll only take a number over $5 million, and you're like, well, it's a $3 million property, well, that gives you a lot of closure here. But a lot of sellers are like, I'd only accept an offer if the number was crazy or really compelling or nuts or whatever it is. And they use that language instead of a specific number. So what they're actually saying here is they don't really have motivation to sell, obviously, right? They really only want to sell if they're convinced. And typically buyers are really, they get nervous when they hear this because they don't think that there's any motivation. They don't think it's really worth spending their time on pursuing this deal anymore because they don't think a deal is going to be there to be had based on how the seller is speaking about it. And that is true. And that is true I should say that's true for most scenarios. However, similar to objection number one, where we at least want to get that seller who says the timing's not right an offer for them to chew on, it's the same thing here. We still want to get them an offer even if they're not sharing their number because, again, their perception of the number around the property may actually be reasonable. Maybe it's a building that you would pay $1 million for, right? And you get the rent roll and you're like, I'd pay $1 million for this. And the seller's like, I only want to take some crazy number, but he thinks that crazy number is 950, 975, and you offer $1 million, and you're actually right in the, you're getting somewhere. This literally happened to me with a 24-unit deal in Manchester that we bought a few years ago. Seller's like, I'm not selling unless it's a crazy number. And I eventually started pulling the thread far enough and made an offer, and it was above what he perceived to be that crazy figure. And we got a deal done, right? And it worked for both parties. So even though they're saying that you still don't want to prejudge the deal, you still want to see it through and you still want to make that offer because you'll find that some small percentage of the time, it's actually in the seller's range. Some other things that you can say when a seller says that. Okay, understood that you want some crazy number. And let's say they actually share that crazy number. How did you come up with that figure? Why the number 4 million? Is there some thought process behind the scenes there that you're willing to share? Actually trying to understand the psychology behind it, right? And maybe that gives you a little bit more insight into the deal. Well, this building down the street sold for that, and that's what I want to get. Well, maybe the building down the street has much bigger units, and it's more renovated. It's in a slightly better area. Well, at least now you can start to continue this conversation and maybe gently educate the seller in such a way that brings them back to a range in which is reasonable. Let's say, again, same thing. That figure, and this is just me reading off, literally our script here. That figure seems a bit steep for the current market. Always use, the faster you can start throwing hard data that's irrefutable to support your case, the better. We just bought X property at Y address for Z price, or I should say, we just bought X property for, Y price, and that translates to Z price per unit or price per bedroom or, average rent or cap rate or whatever. There's another couple of deals that sold, listing the addresses and the sales price, et cetera, that we feel help support our offer. Here's some data to chew on, right? Oftentimes using data, hard facts, hard numbers, that it starts to remove you from the gray area and just perception around a property's value can actually start to educate a seller. And again, you're not trying to convince that seller to sell then. You're trying to give them the ammunition and at least show them, or I should say the ammunition to walk their own expectations down while also communicating to that seller that you're a thoughtful buyer who's not just throwing random offers out that they might feel is low. When you actually use data to support your offer, a seller can't get angry at you around the offer that you're making. Sure, they may not want to take it, but they can't get upset about it because they've seen that you've came to that conclusion through reasoning and through hard data. And that's typically the route that we take with that third objection. So I hope this was a helpful episode for all of you folks out there that are speaking directly with sellers, a little bit of more of a tactical one. If you're an LP or a passive investor who's interested in learning how you can partner on the deals that we find using strategies like this, go and check out the New Hampshire Multifamily Fund III in the show notes. And again, reach out if you have any questions too about that. My contact information is going to be in that OM and would love to chat about it if you're somebody who wants to learn a little bit more about our business or that deal in particular. And for all of you who may not be LPs, but may be active folks, if you learned something in this episode, please consider leaving the podcast a rating and review. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode.